The autumn rain drummed against the tall windows of Windsor Castle as James Mitchell adjusted his red uniform jacket for what he believed would be the last time. After 23 years of faithful service as a palace guard, the 60-year-old man had seen enough secrets to fill several lifetimes. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he prepared for his final shift, knowing that tomorrow he would hand in his ceremonial sword and walk away from the only life he had ever known. James had always been a man of honor. Born to a working-class family in Yorkshire, he had joined the Queen's Guard straight out of military service, drawn by the prestige and the chance to serve the crown. Over the decades, he had stood motionless for hours in all weather conditions, protecting the royal family while remaining invisible to them. He had guarded births, deaths, celebrations, and scandals, always maintaining the strict code of silence that came with his position. But tonight was different. Tonight, James carried a burden that had been eating away at him for weeks, a secret so explosive that it threatened to shake the very foundations of the monarchy he had sworn to protect. As he walked through the familiar corridors of the castle, his mind wandered back to that fateful evening 3 weeks ago when his world had been turned upside down. It had been a quiet Thursday when James received the call that would change everything. His daughter Sarah, a single mother struggling to make ends meet in London, had called in tears. Her 8-year-old son Tommy, James's beloved grandson, had been caught stealing at school. The headmaster had found several expensive items in the boy's backpack, items that clearly did not belong to him. James had rushed to London immediately, his heart breaking at the sight of his grandson's tear-stained face. Tommy was a good child, curious and intelligent, but the family's financial struggles had been weighing heavily on the young boy's shoulders. Sarah worked 2 jobs just to pay the rent on their small flat, and there was rarely money left over for the toys and gadgets that Tommy's classmates took for granted. The drive back to Windsor had been silent, with Tommy curled up in the passenger seat, clutching his grandfather's hand. James had planned to have a gentle conversation with the boy about right and wrong, but what he discovered when they arrived at his cottage would change the course of their lives forever. As they entered the small house that James had called home for over 2 decades, Tommy had begun pulling items from his pockets, his small hands shaking with nervous energy. James watched in growing alarm as his grandson produced what appeared to be costume jewelry, thinking nothing of it at first. Children often collected shiny trinkets, and he assumed these were toys or cheap imitations. But, as James examined the items more closely under the lamplight, his blood ran cold. The intricate craftsmanship, the weight of the metals, the perfect clarity of the gemstones, these were no children's toys. His trained eye, honed by years of observing the royal family's most precious possessions, recognized the unmistakable quality of authentic royal jewelry. Among the items was a delicate sapphire brooch that James had seen countless times pinned to the lapel of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, during official engagements. There was also a pair of diamond earrings that sparkled with the distinctive fire of stones from the crown jewel collection, and a pearl necklace that he distinctly remembered seeing Kate wear during her wedding reception. James's mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. How had these priceless artifacts ended up in his grandson's possession? Tommy, sensing his grandfather's distress, had begun to cry again, explaining through his sobs that he had found the pretty things in a special hiding place and thought they were treasures meant to be discovered. The old guard's heart sank as he realized the implications. Someone within the palace walls had access to Kate's private jewelry collection, someone who had either stolen these pieces or was hiding them for reasons unknown. The fact that a child had stumbled upon them suggested that they were being concealed in a location where an 8-year-old might explore unsupervised. As James questioned his grandson gently, a picture began to emerge that filled him with dread. Tommy described finding the jewelry in a wooden box hidden behind loose stones in an old wall, in a part of the castle that was rarely visited by tourists or staff. The boy had been exploring during one of his visits to see his grandfather, curious about the castle's many secret passages and hidden rooms. But it was Tommy's description of the woman he had seen near that same location that made James's blood freeze. The boy described a woman with silver hair, elegant clothing, and what he called mean eyes who had been acting suspiciously in the area where he later discovered the hidden jewelry. The description could only match one person within the palace walls, Camilla, the queen consort. James spent that entire night pacing his small cottage, the jewelry laid out on his kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene. His mind struggled to accept what seemed increasingly obvious. Could the queen consort really be involved in the theft of Catherine's jewelry? The very idea seemed absurd, yet the evidence was literally sitting before him. He thought about the tension he had observed between the two women over the years. While both maintained public facades of cordiality, James had witnessed enough private moments to sense the underlying friction. Camilla had struggled to find her place within the royal hierarchy, always seeming to feel overshadowed by Catherine's natural grace and the public's obvious affection for the younger woman. The jewelry itself told a story of deliberate selection. These were not random pieces, but items with deep personal significance to Catherine. The sapphire brooch had been a gift from Prince William on their 5th wedding anniversary. The diamond earrings had belonged to Princess Diana, making them irreplaceable family heirlooms. The pearl necklace was a wedding gift from the Queen herself, symbolizing Catherine's acceptance into the royal family. As dawn broke over Windsor Castle, James made the most difficult decision of his life. He could not simply return the jewelry and pretend nothing had happened. The implications were too serious, the potential damage to the monarchy too great. But he also could not expose his grandson to the scandal that would inevitably follow. The boy was innocent, a victim of curiosity who had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. James carefully packed the jewelry back into a small cloth bag, his hands shaking with the weight of responsibility. He would have to find a way to return these items without implicating Tommy, while also ensuring that the truth came to light. The crown had been his life's work, his sacred duty, but he could not allow corruption to flourish in the shadows of the palace walls. The following days had been a nightmare of careful planning and sleepless nights. James used his security clearance to investigate the location Tommy had described, confirming the existence of the hidden compartment. He also began documenting everything he could about the jewelry's disappearance, noting when each piece had last been seen in public and cross-referencing those dates with palace security logs. What he discovered made his suspicions even stronger. The thefts had occurred during periods when Camilla had official access to various parts of the castle, including Catherine's private quarters during official events. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, suggesting someone with intimate knowledge of the royal family's schedules and movements. James also uncovered evidence of other missing items, smaller pieces that had been reported lost but never found. A pattern began to emerge of valuable objects disappearing from Catherine's collection, always items with emotional rather than purely monetary value. It was as if someone was deliberately trying to strip away the symbols of Catherine's place within the royal family. The psychological impact on James had been devastating. This was not just about stolen jewelry, but about a betrayal of everything he had believed in. The royal family was supposed to represent the highest ideals of British society: honor, duty, and integrity. To discover that one of its most senior members might be engaged in petty theft was almost too much to bear. As his final shift approached, James knew he could no longer remain silent. The weight of the secret was destroying him from the inside, affecting his sleep, his appetite, and his ability to concentrate on his duties. He had served the crown faithfully for over 2 decades, but his loyalty to the institution demanded that he expose the corruption within it, regardless of the personal cost. The rain continued to fall as James walked through the castle's corridors one last time as an active guard. Tomorrow, he would request a private audience with Prince William, Catherine's husband and the future king. The conversation would be the most important of his life, one that could either save the monarchy from a devastating scandal or destroy his own reputation and livelihood in the process. But James Mitchell was a man of honor, and honor demanded that he speak the truth, no matter how painful or costly that truth might be. The jewelry hidden in his cottage was evidence of a crime, and justice demanded that the perpetrator be held accountable, regardless of their position or title. As he stood at his post for the final time, watching the castle's inhabitants go about their daily routines, James wondered how many other secrets lay hidden within these ancient walls. How many other acts of betrayal had been covered up in the name of protecting the institution? His discovery had opened his eyes to the possibility that the pristine image of the royal family might be nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, hiding a much darker reality beneath. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of the stolen jewelry, but the future of the monarchy itself. James knew that once he spoke the words that had been burning inside him for weeks, there would be no going back. The truth, once revealed, would have consequences that would ripple through the royal family for generations to come. As the clock struck midnight, marking the end of his watch and the beginning of the most important day of his life, James Mitchell made a silent vow. He would honor his oath to protect the crown, even if it meant protecting it from one of its own members. The truth would be told, justice would be served, and the integrity of the institution he had served so faithfully would be preserved, whatever the personal cost to himself or his family. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy, all because a curious 8-year-old boy had discovered some pretty things hidden in a castle wall. The morning after his final shift, James Mitchell sat in his small cottage kitchen, staring at the telephone that would change everything. The jewelry lay wrapped in soft cloth before him, each piece a damning piece of evidence that could topple the careful balance of the royal household. His hands shook as he dialed the private number he had memorized years ago but never used, the direct line to Prince William's personal secretary. The conversation was brief and formal. James identified himself and requested an urgent private audience with the Prince of Wales, citing matters of palace security that required immediate attention. The secretary, recognizing James's name and long service record, agreed to arrange a meeting that very afternoon. There was no going back now. As James prepared for the most important meeting of his life, his mind drifted to his grandson Tommy, who was safely back in London with his mother Sarah. The boy had no idea of the storm his innocent discovery had unleashed. James had told Sarah only that some valuable items had been found and needed to be returned to their rightful owners. The full truth would have to wait until after he had spoken with Prince William. The walk to the prince's private study felt like the longest of James's life. Every corridor held memories of his decades of service, every familiar face he passed might be seeing him for the last time as a respected member of the royal household. He had changed into his best civilian clothes, but still carried himself with the military bearing that had defined his adult life. Prince William received him in his private study, a warm room lined with books and family photographs. The prince looked tired, the weight of his responsibilities evident in the lines around his eyes. He had recently returned from a grueling tour of Commonwealth nations, and palace gossip suggested that tensions within the family were taking their toll on the future king. James, Prince William said, rising from his desk with a genuine smile, "I understand you wanted to see me urgently. You've been with us for over 20 years, haven't you? Your service has been exemplary." The kindness in the prince's voice made James's task even more difficult. This was not just a formal report to a superior, but a conversation that would shatter illusions and force painful truths into the light. James had rehearsed his words countless times, but now they seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what he had to reveal. "Your Royal Highness," James began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, "what I have to tell you concerns the security of your family and the integrity of this institution. 3 weeks ago, my grandson made a discovery that has led me to uncover what I believe to be a serious crime within these walls." Prince William's expression grew serious as James carefully unwrapped the jewelry, placing each piece on the polished wood of the desk. The prince's sharp intake of breath confirmed what James already knew: these were authentic pieces from his wife's personal collection, items that should have been secure in the princess's private quarters. "These belong to Catherine," Prince William said, his voice barely above a whisper. He reached out to touch the sapphire brooch, his fingers trembling slightly. "This was her anniversary gift. She's been looking for it everywhere. We thought it might have been lost during the move to Adelaide Cottage." James felt his heart break a little more as he saw the relief and confusion warring on the prince's face. The man was clearly struggling to understand how his wife's precious jewelry had ended up in the hands of a palace guard's grandson. The explanation James had to offer would be even harder to accept. "Sir, I believe these items were stolen," James said carefully, "and I have reason to suspect they were being hidden within the castle walls, possibly as part of a larger pattern of theft from the princess's collection." The word "stolen" hung in the air like a physical presence. Prince William sank back into his chair, his face pale as he processed the implications. Palace security was supposed to be impenetrable, the private quarters of the royal family sacred and secure. The idea that someone within their trusted circle could be stealing from his wife was almost incomprehensible. "Who?" Prince William asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Who would dare to steal from Catherine? From my wife?" This was the moment James had been dreading. The accusation he was about to make would either be received as the testimony of a faithful servant or dismissed as the fantasy of a disgruntled employee. Either way, his life as he knew it was about to end. "Sir, based on my grandson's account of where he found these items and his description of suspicious activity in that area, I believe the perpetrator may be someone very close to the family. Someone with unrestricted access to the princess's private quarters and detailed knowledge of her schedule." Prince William leaned forward, his eyes intense with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You're talking about someone within our inner circle. Someone we trust implicitly. James, do you understand what you're suggesting?" "I do, sir. And I would not make such an accusation lightly. But the evidence points to Queen Consort Camilla." The silence that followed was deafening. Prince William stared at James as if he had spoken in a foreign language, his mind clearly struggling to process the accusation. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "That is an extraordinarily serious allegation, James. Do you have any idea what you're saying? You're accusing my stepmother, the Queen Consort, of stealing from my wife." James had prepared for this reaction, but the pain in Prince William's voice cut him deeply. This was a man who had already endured more family trauma than anyone should have to bear, and now James was adding to that burden with revelations that threatened to tear the family apart even further. "Sir, I have served this family faithfully for over 2 decades. I would never make such a claim without careful consideration. My grandson described a woman matching the Queen Consort's description acting suspiciously near the location where he discovered these items. The timing of the thefts corresponds with periods when she had access to the princess's quarters. And..." James paused, knowing that his next words would cross a line from which there would be no return. "Sir, I have observed tension between the two ladies over the years. There have been incidents, small things that individually meant nothing, but together they paint a picture of resentment and jealousy that may have escalated beyond what anyone imagined." Prince William stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the castle grounds. His shoulders were rigid with tension, and James could see the internal battle being waged within him. As the future king, he had to consider the implications for the monarchy. As a son, he was being asked to believe something terrible about a woman his father loved. As a husband, he was confronting the theft of items precious to his wife. "Tell me about these incidents," Prince William said without turning around. James took a deep breath and began to recount observations that he had never shared with anyone. There had been the Christmas when Camilla had made cutting remarks about Catherine's choice of jewelry for the family portrait. The state dinner where she had accidentally spilled wine on Catherine's dress moments before the photographs. The charity event where she had deliberately upstaged Catherine's announcement about her new patronage. Each incident on its own could be explained away as accident or misunderstanding, but together they revealed a pattern of subtle undermining that had escalated over time. James described how he had noticed Camilla's reaction whenever Catherine received positive press coverage, the flash of anger that quickly transformed into a practiced smile. "There was an incident last month," James continued, during the state visit from the President of France. The Queen Consort was in the princess's quarters for what was supposed to be a brief consultation about protocol. I was stationed outside and observed that she remained there much longer than necessary, and, when she emerged, she appeared flustered. Prince William turned from the window, his face a mask of controlled emotion. "And you believe this is when she may have taken these items?" "It's possible, sir. The timing would correspond with when the princess first noticed they were missing." The prince walked back to his desk and picked up the pearl necklace, holding it up to the light. These pearls had belonged to his grandmother, the queen, before being gifted to Catherine as a wedding present. They represented continuity, tradition, and the acceptance of Catherine into the royal family. The symbolism of their theft was almost as devastating as the act itself. "James, do you understand what this means?" Prince William's voice was heavy with exhaustion. "If what you're suggesting is true, it means my father's wife has been systematically stealing from mine. It means there's a cancer at the heart of this family that could destroy everything we've worked to rebuild." The weight of responsibility settled on James's shoulders like a physical burden. He had not wanted to be the bearer of such devastating news, but his oath of service demanded honesty above all else. The monarchy's strength lay in its moral authority, and that authority could not coexist with corruption and betrayal. Sir, I believe the thefts may go beyond these items. If my suspicions are correct, there may be other missing pieces, items that were dismissed as misplaced or lost. A pattern of systematic theft designed to undermine the princess's position within the family. Prince William sank back into his chair, suddenly, looking much older than his years. The burden of future kingship was heavy enough without adding family scandals to the weight he carried. James could see the man wrestling with the impossible choice between family loyalty and institutional integrity. "What do you recommend?" the prince asked finally. It was a question James had hoped he wouldn't have to answer. The proper course of action would involve investigation, confrontation, and, potentially, criminal charges. But this was the royal family, where normal rules often didn't apply, and where scandal could damage not just individuals but the institution of monarchy itself. "Sir, I believe a discreet investigation is necessary. Perhaps involving palace security and your private secretary. If evidence supports my suspicions, then the matter will need to be handled carefully to minimize damage to the crown." Prince William nodded slowly, his mind clearly already working through the logistics of such an investigation. "And your grandson? What does he know?" "Very little, sir. He believes he found some pretty trinkets and helped return them to their owners. My daughter knows only that valuable items were found and needed to be returned. They have no knowledge of the larger implications." "Good. This must remain absolutely confidential until we determine the truth. James, I need you to understand that if you're wrong about this, the consequences for you will be severe. False accusations against a member of the royal family are not taken lightly." "I understand, sir. But I would rather face those consequences than allow theft and deception to continue unchecked within these walls." Prince William studied James's face for a long moment, seeing the integrity and resolve that had made him a trusted guardian for over 2 decades. This was not a man given to flights of fancy or malicious gossip. If James Mitchell believed something serious was happening, then it deserved investigation. "Very well. I'll arrange for a discreet inquiry. In the meantime, these items will be returned to Catherine with a suitable explanation. And, James, thank you for bringing this to my attention." It took courage to come forward with such serious allegations. As James left the prince's study, he felt both relief and dread. The truth was finally in motion, but the consequences would ripple through the royal family for years to come. He had done his duty, but at a cost that was only beginning to become clear. Walking back through the castle corridors, James noticed things he had never seen before: the subtle tensions between staff members, the careful way servants navigated the complex relationships within the royal household. His revelation had opened his eyes to the fragile nature of the family he had devoted his life to protecting. The investigation would begin soon, and, with it would come questions that might tear the royal family apart. But James Mitchell had served with honor, and honor demanded that the truth be told, no matter how painful that truth might be. The future of the monarchy itself might depend on the courage to confront the corruption within its own walls. The investigation began in whispers and shadows, conducted by Prince William's most trusted advisors with the discretion of those who understood that the very foundations of the monarchy were at stake. Sir Marcus Whitfield, the prince's private secretary and a man whose loyalty was beyond question, took charge of the delicate inquiry. His decades of experience in royal protocol and crisis management would be tested like never before. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was quietly informed about the return of her missing jewelry, though the full circumstances were carefully withheld. The official explanation was that the items had been discovered during routine maintenance work in an unused part of the castle. Her relief at their return was evident, but she was astute enough to sense that something more serious lay beneath the surface. "William, these pieces weren't simply misplaced, were they?" Catherine asked privately as she examined the returned jewelry. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the sapphire brooch, recognizing that its pristine condition suggested careful handling rather than accidental loss. Prince William found himself in the impossible position of protecting his wife from painful truths while ensuring she remained vigilant about her personal security. "There are some concerns about palace security that we're investigating. For now, I need you to be especially careful about your personal belongings and report anything unusual immediately. The weight of the secret was already taking its toll on the prince. He had always prided himself on his honesty with Catherine, but this situation required a level of discretion that felt like deception. The investigation needed to proceed without alerting potential suspects, and that meant keeping even his wife partially in the dark. Meanwhile, Sir Marcus had quietly assembled a small team of investigators, each sworn to absolute secrecy. The team included Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Hammond, a specialist in art theft who had worked with the royal household on previous security matters, and Dr. Elizabeth Thornton, a forensic expert whose discreet handling of sensitive cases had earned her the trust of the establishment. The investigation began with a meticulous examination of the location where Tommy had discovered the jewelry. Hidden behind loose stones in a wall that dated back to the castle's medieval origins, investigators found a sophisticated hiding place that had clearly been used multiple times. Forensic analysis revealed traces of fabric consistent with high-end jewelry pouches, and microscopic evidence suggested that many different items had been stored there over time. More disturbing was the discovery that this hiding place could only be accessed by someone with intimate knowledge of the castle's layout and security patterns. The location was in a section that was off-limits to tourists and rarely visited by junior staff. Only senior members of the royal household and their immediate circles would have known about this secluded area. Security footage from the relevant corridors proved challenging to analyze. The cameras in that section were older models with limited coverage, and the angles had been carefully avoided by whoever was using the hiding place. However, investigators did find several instances where a figure could be glimpsed moving through the area at times when they should have been elsewhere. The timeline analysis proved even more damning. Cross-referencing the reported dates when Catherine's jewelry had gone missing with palace schedules revealed a clear pattern. The thefts had occurred during periods when Camilla had official reason to be in various parts of the castle, including times when she had been in Catherine's private quarters for supposedly innocent reasons. Dr. Thornton's forensic examination of the jewelry itself yielded additional evidence. While the items had been carefully cleaned, microscopic traces of expensive hand cream were found on several pieces. When compared to samples obtained discreetly from various members of the household staff, the cream matched the specific brand and formulation used exclusively by Camilla, a custom blend created by a high-end London cosmetics house. Perhaps most significantly, investigators discovered that this was not an isolated incident. A careful audit of palace inventory revealed a pattern of missing items from Catherine's collection dating back nearly 2 years. Small, valuable pieces had been disappearing at regular intervals, but the thefts had been so skillfully executed that they were dismissed as misplacements or attributed to the chaos of moving between royal residences. Detective Chief Inspector Hammond compiled a detailed report that painted a picture of systematic theft executed with insider knowledge and careful planning. The perpetrator had deliberately chosen items with high emotional value to Catherine but relatively low public visibility, ensuring that their disappearance wouldn't trigger immediate alarm or media attention. Your Royal Highness, Hammond reported to Prince William during a private briefing, the evidence strongly supports the allegations made by Mr. Mitchell. We're looking at a pattern of theft that demonstrates both motive and opportunity, executed by someone with unrestricted access to the princess's personal effects. Prince William absorbed the report with growing heaviness in his heart. The investigation he had hoped would clear his stepmother had instead confirmed his worst fears. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling, pointing inexorably toward Camilla's involvement in the systematic theft of his wife's most precious possessions. The psychological aspects of the case were equally troubling. Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic psychiatrist consulted discreetly about the pattern of thefts, suggested that the crimes went beyond mere acquisitiveness. The specific targeting of emotionally significant items suggested a deeper motivation rooted in jealousy, resentment, and a desire to undermine Catherine's position within the family hierarchy. This isn't random theft, Dr. Chen explained in her confidential report. The perpetrator is choosing items that represent acceptance, love, and status within the royal family. They're not interested in monetary value but in symbolic significance. This suggests someone who feels their own position is threatened by the victim's success and popularity. The investigation also uncovered evidence of attempts to cover the tracks. palace security logs had been accessed and modified on several occasions, always by someone with high-level clearance. The modifications were subtle, designed to create gaps in the record during times when the thefts were likely occurring. Sir Marcus discovered that Camilla had been requesting access to parts of the castle that weren't typically within her usual areas of responsibility. She had cited various reasons: overseeing renovations, consulting on historical preservation, meeting with charitable organizations, but the pattern suggested a systematic effort to familiarize herself with security blind spots and storage areas. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Eleanor Davies, an elderly cleaning lady who had worked at the castle for over 30 years, came forward after being assured of confidentiality. She had witnessed Camilla on several occasions in areas where she had no official business, always carrying a small handbag that seemed heavier when she left than when she arrived. "I thought it was strange, Your Highness," Mrs. Davies explained to Sir Marcus in a private interview. "Her Majesty Queen Consort was always so particular about her schedule, never early, never late. But sometimes I would see her in corridors she shouldn't have been in, looking around like she was checking to make sure no one was watching." The elderly woman also reported finding evidence that someone had been in Catherine's private quarters when the princess was away. Small things: a drawer not quite closed properly, cosmetics arranged differently than usual, jewelry boxes with fingerprints that didn't match the princess's patterns. At the time, she had attributed these details to the princess's lady's maid, but, in retrospect, they suggested unauthorized access. As the investigation progressed, the psychological toll on everyone involved became apparent. Prince William found himself watching his stepmother with new eyes during family gatherings, looking for signs of guilt or deception. The natural warmth he had always shown her became stilted and formal, a change that didn't go unnoticed by other family members. King Charles, sensing tension but unaware of its source, approached his son with concern. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Prince William's life, as he struggled to balance his duty to his father with his responsibility to protect his wife and preserve the integrity of the crown. "William, is everything all right?" King Charles asked during a private walk through the castle grounds. "You seem distant lately, and I sense there's tension between you and Camilla. Have you had some sort of disagreement?" The prince found himself in an impossible position. The investigation was still ongoing, and premature disclosure could compromise the evidence gathering. But his father's obvious distress at the perceived family discord was heartbreaking to witness. "There are some security concerns we're addressing," Prince William said carefully. "Nothing that affects your safety, but issues that require discreet handling. I promise I'll explain everything once we have all the facts." The partial truth satisfied King Charles temporarily, but Prince William could see the worry in his father's eyes. The king had endured enough family scandals in his lifetime, and the prospect of more turmoil was clearly weighing heavily on him. Meanwhile, Catherine began to notice the increased security measures around her personal belongings and the subtle changes in how certain family members interacted with her. Her natural intelligence and years of experience in reading palace dynamics told her that something significant was happening, but the wall of protective silence around her was frustrating and frightening. The investigation had also uncovered the sophisticated methods used to select and steal the items. Camilla had clearly studied Catherine's routine, noting when she wore specific pieces and when they were likely to be unattended in her private quarters. The thefts were timed to coincide with Catherine's public engagements, when her attention would be focused elsewhere and the missing items wouldn't be immediately noticed. Security experts brought in to assess the situation were amazed by the perpetrators' knowledge of palace security systems. The thefts had been executed with near-perfect timing, avoiding surveillance cameras and security patrols with a precision that suggested detailed planning and reconnaissance. As the evidence mounted, Prince William faced the terrible reality that his worst fears were being confirmed. The woman his father had married, the woman who was supposed to be a stabilizing influence on the monarchy, was systematically undermining his wife through calculated theft and deception. The next phase of the investigation would require even more delicate handling. Confronting Camilla directly would be necessary, but it would also trigger a crisis that could tear the royal family apart and potentially damage the monarchy's reputation irreparably. The evidence was compelling, but the consequences of acting on it would reshape the future of the British crown forever. Prince William knew that the hardest decisions of his life lay ahead, choices that would test his loyalty to family against his duty to justice and truth. The investigation had confirmed his fears, but now he faced the even more daunting task of deciding what to do with the devastating knowledge he possessed. The confrontation with Camilla was scheduled for a seemingly innocent tea meeting in the Queen Consort's private sitting room. Prince William had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment, knowing that the next few hours would either clear his stepmother's name or confirm the darkest suspicions about the royal family's internal dynamics. Sir Marcus Whitfield would be present as a witness, ostensibly to discuss upcoming royal engagements. Camilla received them graciously, as was her custom, pouring tea from an exquisite china service and making pleasant conversation about the weather and recent royal duties. She appeared relaxed and confident, showing no signs of the anxiety that might be expected from someone harboring guilty secrets. Her composure was either a testament to innocence or to a remarkable ability to maintain facades under pressure. "William, dear," Camilla said with apparent warmth, "you look tired. I hope you're not working yourself too hard. The pressures of your position can be overwhelming, I know." The irony of receiving sympathy from the person he suspected of betraying his family was not lost on Prince William. He studied her face carefully, looking for any hint of deception, any crack in the carefully maintained exterior. But Camilla had decades of experience in navigating royal protocol and managing difficult situations. "Actually, Camilla, there's something quite serious we need to discuss," Prince William began, his voice measured and formal. "It concerns some security issues within the palace that have come to light recently." A flicker of something, concern, curiosity, or perhaps wariness, passed across Camilla's face before she regained her composed expression. "Security issues? That sounds worrying. How can I help?" Sir Marcus leaned forward slightly, his presence lending gravity to the moment. "Ma'am, we've been investigating some irregularities involving missing personal items from various royal residences. The investigation has revealed some concerning patterns that we need to address." Camilla's hand paused for just a moment as she reached for her teacup, a tiny hesitation that Prince William noticed immediately.